What I want to try to do tonight is introduce you to this app called iNaturalist. By a show of hands, how many of you have downloaded it onto your phone or use it on your computer if you don't have a phone? I know one person in the room. Okay. How many of you use it a lot? Would you say? Okay. And how many of you have used it a few times and then kind of forgot about it? Okay. Okay. So iNaturalist is actually a really good app. I got to go get the clickers. Hi, everybody out there that's watching from a distance. Okay. So what we're going to do tonight is introduce you to the app, talk a little bit about how it works, how you can use it for your benefit, how it can also benefit science and conservation in the state of Texas. And then at the end, we're going to do some activity for those of you that have it on your phone that might involve getting some free plants, I think. I'm not sure. I heard rumors to that effect, so we'll get started. First of all, I am with the Texas Nature Trackers program, which is a very small program. There's 2 of us, and as of September 1st, there will be 1 of us, namely me, because my colleague just took the state ornithologist job with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So she got a wonderful promotion, but it leaves a big hole. But we are part of a group of 4 called the Community Stewardship and Engagement Team. And what we try to do is we travel the state of Texas, whether it's online or in person, trying to get people engaged in community science. And we use the tool iNaturalist to kind of connect people to that effort to learn more about the plants and animals of the state of Texas. So we're part of what's called the Wildlife Diversity Program, which is part of the Wildlife Division in Texas Parks and Wildlife. But we focus mostly on things called SGCN, which are species of greatest conservation need. A lot of people would call us non-game people. So you have the game biologists and you have the non-game folk, and we're part of that group. And so what we do, like I say, is try to bring community scientists together of all backgrounds through different events, through bio blitzes, through events like the City Nature Challenge, which Gillespie County is part of the San Antonio area each April, May, and then trying to help us by getting the general public to actually log and take pictures of what they see, plants and animals. It helps us get a better understanding of what's out there in the landscape, because every county in Texas has 1 biologist, and they cannot possibly track all the species of plants and animals out there. And that's where community scientists or citizen scientists, people like yourselves, can help us learn more about what's going on in the state of Texas. The other thing that's really valuable to you personally is if you have an interest, if you have a piece of land and you have an interest in what's growing on your property, you have no idea what some of it is, you can go out with your phone, take a picture of it, and iNaturalist will help you identify what it is. So you can let's say you're enrolled in the Land Management Assistance Program, and you have to do certain land management practices every year. Logging what you have on your property is one of those things. You can do that with iNaturalist. You can print it all that data off and give it to your agent and satisfy that result. That is one of your obligations. We have our own webpage that you can visit. We have several projects that I'll talk about here in just a second. We also have a list of target species, those things that we try to focus on, and then also just things you can do to get involved with community science. So we do have 12 projects that we help with or oversee or sponsor. They range from herps of Texas, which are all reptiles and amphibians, all the way down to bald eagle nests across the state of Texas. So a wide range of opportunities to make contributions to these projects. We then take that data of those SGCNs that I mentioned earlier and take that and get it over to what's called the Texas Natural Diversity Database. And that's where we put it on a map. This is where you can find golden cheek warblers. This is where you can find this. This is where you can find that. And that gives us a better understanding when we're working with, TxDOT is putting in a new road. They can come to this. They're actually required by law, whether they want to or not. I've heard various opinions on that. But they could come to the Texas Natural Diversity Database and say, hey, we're putting a road through here. Are there any species that we need to be aware of? So it's a planning tool for developers, for TxDOT, for anybody. The oil industry can use it if they want to. So what we try to do is grab the naturalist community, those community scientists, use iNaturalist as a tool to get them to help us run it through the Texas Nature Trackers projects, and eventually gets out to the research and conservation community. Here's the deal. We can't practice conservation if we don't have all the facts. Okay. And that means the facts in our case is, where are these things found? A lot of people think, well, these agencies, they're just trying to put everything on the endangered species list, so we can't do anything with our land. And then the government wants to come and take our land because it's got a golden cheek warbler on it. None of that's true, but that's what people think. Our goal is to actually get those things off those lists. But we can't make good conservation decisions if we don't have all the knowledge. And how many of you are familiar with the golden cheek warbler? The hill country of Texas is the only place in the world where this little songbird nests. Only place in the world. And some people hate them, some people love them, right? I've always maintained this is what the power of this kind of community science effort could be. Is it in danger? If we could get one spring, now I understand this will never happen. If one spring got every landowner in the Texas, the 40-some counties that this bird nests in, to say, I'm going to go out, here's what this bird sounds like, I'm going to go out on my property 3 times during the spring, I'm going to listen for this sound, and if it's there, I'm going to let somebody know that it exists on my property. Would that bird be an endangered species? And I don't know what the answer is. But we're making decisions in conservation based on bits of information. So that's why having more members of the state of Texas engaged in it gives us more information. We can make better decisions. So that ultimately we can get rid of these lists. It'd be ideal if nothing. So again, we focus on the species greatest conservation need. The idea is to get them over to the Natural Diversity Database. And what is an SGCN? It's a plant or animal that's declining or rare and in need of some kind of attention to recover or to prevent the need for listing under state or federal regulation. So by finding those species that are declining and addressing them before they get to that point and getting them out of that list, and this next year, every year they review these lists. Right now there's, I think, somewhere about 1,290 species just in Texas that are considered SGCN. But the more we know about it, the more research efforts can we go to figure out what's going on. What can we do and get on the ground conservation? Take the horned lizard, for example. It's an SGCN list. There's a picture of it right there. There are efforts now at San Antonio Zoo, at one of the, I think Fort Worth Zoo maybe, where they're breeding them in captivity with the idea that if they can raise up enough of them and they can find suitable habitat, they can put them back on the landscape and their populations can build up over time so that maybe it comes off this list. Because talk about an iconic Texas lizard, right? Okay. And we get requests all the time and say, hey, I've got these ants have come back to my property. I think it'd be a great place to get horny toads. And please, can I have some horny toads? Well, it's not that simple. Plus you have to keep in mind, baby horny toads get eaten by everything. Everything wants to eat them. So it takes a lot of them on the landscape to overcome all the predation, right? But that's the kind of effort that can be had. And if they're successful, then landowners can become engaged in the process. And suddenly one day we don't have to have that iconic Texas critter on the list heading towards being labeled as threatened or endangered. So that's what we're trying to prevent. So let's talk iNaturalist. First of all, way back in 2013, the Texas Nature Trackers program, before my time, began seeing the value of iNaturalist as a data collection tool. The first thing our program did is somebody gave one of our staff a whole bunch of money to develop our own app, just specific to Texas, which was great, complicated, but great. And then the first time Windows updated, there was no money to update the Texas Parks and Wildlife app, and it is no longer in use. So that's when we decided, hey, somebody decided, let's use iNaturalist. It's already done. It's already there. And we can use it without having to maintain, right? So iNaturalist is an online social network. This is their definition. This was invented by some graduate students in California, sitting around probably drinking a beer, and came up with this thing. They want an online social network of people sharing biodiversity information to help each other learn about nature. There are two goals of iNaturalist. are to connect people to nature and then also to generate scientifically valuable data. And most agencies, state agencies around the country are using iNaturalist in one form or another with community scientists to collect data. So it's something that's got broad appeal. It's a global app now. This was yesterday, actually this morning, 112 million observations globally. That's a lot of information. In Texas, we have 6.6 million observations. So as a state agency, we'd be idiots to go, yeah, that's not important. There's nothing of value there. And let's face it, a lot of those observations are cardinals and white-tailed deer, right? Okay. That's okay. Because there's millions of other observations that are important. Okay, right now I don't think we have any problems with white-tailed deer in the hill country. At least the last time I looked out my house window. Well, yeah, right. It is a problem. It's the opposite of that way of having it be a problem. So how it works is you download the app on your phone. If you have a phone, and I have to now qualify this first time somebody said I don't have an iPhone, so I just use my camera. So I'm trying to speak in deference to that. But not everybody actually has it. And congratulations for not having one, by the way. In about 2.5 years, I'm not going to have one either. I hope. I can convince my kids that that's okay. You download the app, you go out and you take pictures with the app, and you share it with the iNaturalist community, and they help you identify what it is. The app itself, it's artificial intelligence, helps you do that as well. Okay, so it's really, and it's pretty powerful. It doesn't identify everything. Okay, if you take a picture of a 4 millimeter long bee, it's not going to tell you what species of bee it is, because scientists usually have to put those things under a microscope and look at individual hairs on the abdomen under that microscope to maybe tell who it is. So iNaturalist can't do everything, but it does a lot. So how it actually works in a little more detail. First of all, you have to create an account. It doesn't cost you anything. Then you have to have evidence of what you saw. So that's either a photo or a sound taken with the app or with your camera. And then, of course, you have to figure out what you saw. So let's say you go out and you see this beautiful butterfly on a flower in your yard. You take a picture of it and you have no idea what it is. And so you put it on iNaturalist. The great thing about iNaturalist now is you're going to go, what did you see? And you're going to click on that little button and it's going to give you suggestions. Well, if you see the suggestion that it is, you can click that and choose that. If you don't know, even after with those choices, it'll give you a very generic choice. It may just say it's a species of butterfly. Well, most of us here know what a butterfly looks like, right? You can just choose that and let the other iNaturalist users help you to identify what the species is. So that's kind of one of the powers of the tool. And then, of course, when you take your photograph, it's automatically telling you the date and time when you took it and where you saw it also is recorded. And we're going to talk about that because one of the nice things about iNaturalist, let's say you're on your property and you find something rare and you want to identify it on iNaturalist, but you don't necessarily want to share the location. You can actually block the location so that people can still see the observation, help you identify it, but then you can protect the location data so that nobody goes, oh, I'm coming out to that person's property and sneaking across the fence and go steal it. Okay. I can't imagine too many people do that, but there are people that do it. I don't know if they use iNaturalist as that, but you can protect your data, your location of that data. And so every time you take a picture, you're creating this digital voucher, a dot on a map. So you're recording the presence of that species at that date and time, right? So that's what the map's going to look like on your observations. There's little dots all over the place. And the different colors, by the way, refer to different taxa groups. So birds, reptiles, amphibians, that kind of thing. So the first thing for those of you that don't have it or have never used it, you have to create an account. You can either download the app, create your account on the phone, or I suggest going to the computer and typing in a search for iNaturalist. And there's one reason for that. And I'll show it to you in a moment. But you're going to get a page that looks something like that. You've got the choice of either logging in or signing up. If you got to sign up, you can click on that. You're going to create a username or a password. And you can either just sign in directly, or if you're going to start a new account, you go ahead and create. You got to give them your email. You create your password, your username. It can be whatever you want. And again, there's no cost to this. And one of the things that they've done for people that are nervous that somebody's going to steal your data, in order to be able to get access to iNaturalist, you have to have at least 50 observations. So I like to think that somebody sitting in a dark room in the basement of their mother's house that hasn't seen the light of day because they're on a computer all the time trying to hack into things isn't going to spend enough time going out and taking pictures of 50 things in nature to ever create an account on iNaturalist. Okay, that's what I like to think. Okay. But when you're doing that, and here's the most important thing, and this is why I say go to the web and create your account. The default time zone when you create your account on your phone is Hawaii. As I know it's been hot here this summer, but this is Texas, not Hawaii. So you can go in here and change it to Central Standard Time. And the reason that's important is, let's say you go out and you join a group of people doing what's called a biologist, where it's a timed event and you've only got this little time frame to do your things. You're on Hawaii time, none of your things are going to go into that, which it can be really confusing. First time I taught a workshop and did a BioBlitz, nobody ever told me about that. That's one way to learn when nobody's observations are going into the project, including your own. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So here's just a brief rundown of the app. Wait a minute. There we go. I've got to check myself over here. Let me know if I'm wandering off. Okay. So here's so on the left is going to be the Apple. The other one's going to be the Android on the right. When you open up iNaturalist, this is what it's going to look like on either phone. Fairly similar. There's different buttons and symbols that you have to push for different things. So it shows your total observations. There's your list. You can either put the scientific name first or the common name first. One thing I'll say about the scientific name, that rarely changes. The common names change all the time depending on what part of the country you're in. So when I went to undergraduate school, I took an ornithology class, and my old professor, Dr. William Crawley, took us on our first field trip, and we saw a cardinal sitting on a fence post. He said, "What's that bird?" And we all said, "Cardinal." He goes, "Nope." And I said, I looked at, I was in the front of the bus. I said, "It's a cardinal. You're talking about that red bird right there with the crest?" "Yes." "Nope, not a cardinal." He said, "Well, then what is it?" We all asked. And he said, "It's a red bird. And if you don't call it a red bird, if you call it a cardinal on a test, I'm counting it wrong." Just proof and positive that common names are what you want to call them, your common names, right? Okay, so don't be surprised if you see a common name pops up and you go, "That's not what I called it," but that may be somebody's common name out in California. Okay, so common names are regional generally. So let's say you want to take a picture. On the iPhone, you're going to click on the camera. On this phone, the Android, you're going to hit the plus sign. You're going to have 4 choices. Used to be just have one, take a picture. Okay, the first choice is to use the iPhone camera to take a picture of the thing you're looking at. The next thing is to take a picture from your camera roll that's already on your phone that you can upload straight to iNaturalist. You can also now record sound. So if you've got birds or frogs or toads, you can record their sound and upload it. Or you can even make an observation. If you can. Let's say, for example, I've had a few observations. My house, I count everything that comes to my property. And it's a 0.22 acre yard. So it's just a little yard. But I've had sandhill cranes fly over. Well, they didn't land in the yard, but my yard boundary goes all the way up to heaven. Right? So if it flies over my house, it's going on the list, even if I don't get a picture. Right? So it won't show, nobody will be able to prove that. I can't prove that I saw it, but I can at least document it. So first, let's do the camera roll. So we select, hit the camera roll. We go into our pictures. We pick the picture we want by clicking on it. We add it. It pops up just like this. And then it goes through the identification process, which I'm going to cover in just a little bit. But you'll see there's a name, there's a date, there's a location, geoprivacy. We're going to talk about that. Captive or cultivated, that just means is it a wild plant or not wild plant? Did you put it in the ground? And then different projects that you can attach it to. So that's one way of getting pictures up on iNaturalist. So if you took a picture 2 years ago and you remember where it was, and there's a timestamp and date on it, you can go ahead and upload it. It doesn't have to be what you took today or yesterday. Okay. And in fact, those historical, I call them historical records, are actually really valuable. Or conservation things to see where were these things at one time, 20, maybe it was 15 years ago. If you can get it on there, it gives a historical record of where that plant or animal was. So now if we want to record, did you have a question? Okay. We want to record a sound. We click on that. We hit the record, the little microphone, record the sound for as long as you want. And then you go ahead, save the recording. And once you do that, it goes to this page right here. And all of a sudden, up there on those, there's a box with a plus sign next to it. It's got a little speaker. That's your recording. Now, what's different about the recordings, they're not going to help you identify the recording. Okay? So, if I were going to go, what did you see? Well, in this case, what did I hear? I might only be able to put bird. That's okay. There are users out on iNaturalist that look for bird recordings and might help you identify what that sound was, or a frog or a toad. And then you go through the process, just like I'm going to explain in a moment. That one I happen to know is a cardinal. And so I document it and I share it, and away we go. The symbol for songs or sounds is going to look like that. It's not going to be a photograph, obviously. So a little bit different appearance there on your screen. Okay, so finally, we're going to use the camera. And this is going to be the app camera. The iPhone is going to pull your camera into its use. Couple of things. When you take a picture with iNaturalist on your phone, you can't edit the picture. Okay? So that means that it's whatever it is. Another option, and sometimes I do this, especially with small things or things I want to get a lot of detail with, I'll actually use my phone's camera. I'll click on that, take the picture, and then upload it from my photo files. Because I can edit that picture from my phone and then upload it, right? So that's a little bit of a tip that can help you out. So I take a picture of it. You'll notice up here there is a plus sign here and here. If I want to, I can click on that, and I can take another photograph. And when it comes to plants especially, it's always beneficial to take more than one photograph. Because a lot of times we just want to take a picture of the flower. But as any of you know, if I walked in here today with a composite and it was only the flower head, we'd have a lovely debate about what it might be, right? Especially if it was yellow, because there's a whole lot of them. And a lot of them look very similar. So taking more than one picture of the flowers, of the leaves, that can help with your identification. Yeah.
Is there any particular order to upload them in?
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that, because that can matter. So when I take a picture of a plant that I don't know, I usually take 3 or 4 pictures. I'll put the flower first if it's in bloom, or the fruit if it's not in bloom and it's got a fruit. If that doesn't, and then I'll say, what did I see? Well, that didn't give me a satisfactory answer. Then what I'll do is you can go and switch the order. Then I'll put the leaves on there next and see if that changes the choices. So sometimes that can help. But a lot of times it's through the flower that they're identifying the thing. And a lot of times when you just put the whole plant, especially if it's a robust plant, it may or may not get it. It actually does a surprisingly good job, but you can rotate the sequence. I'd start with the flower, then go to the leaves. But that's my personal approach. Right.
You're loading those. How is there a way to switch their order?
Yeah, you can. So what I do, let's say I take a picture of a plant, and I've got 4 pictures of it, I'll upload them one at it, or just click on all 4 and upload, drag them over and upload it. Then the one that I want to be the first one, I'll feed all the other pictures into that one when I join them together. And then the ones that they go into, that becomes the first. That's the first file picture. Okay, does that make sense? There's probably more than one way to do that, but that's the way I do it. Okay, so we take a picture, and now, again, we can add. Now we're going to click on what did you see? And what's great is it's going to give you all kinds of choices. It's amazing how this works. First of all, it's going to give you a generic choice. It's going to say, hey, we think it's an oak. You don't know what kind of oak? In those choices, just pick oak. Put it up on iNaturalist, see if anybody can help you with further identification. If you know what it is, you can go ahead and choose Texas flyboy. And then when you choose that, it's going to go ahead and populate it on your identification. Then it's going to show you a date and time stamp you see there. Then it's going to show you a location. Now, what's interesting is that picture, that's the same tree. And notice my locations are completely different. So that's based on satellites that are traveling over our heads. One camera is picking up one satellite, one's picking up a different one. Okay. So let's say I want to just check on them. I click on that box. I can either pull up a satellite map, or I can pull up a map like this. I can move that around and center it right where I want to, and then click OK, or save, or whatever it is. Or with check mark or save, and you can reset that location. Okay. Yes.
And this record this to your database that you can block.
That's what we're going to talk about next. Yeah, that's exactly right. It does. So if you leave it public, not only does everybody see the picture, they actually see the exact location, right? So that's when we come down to geoprivacy or location visibility. The default is open, so it's public. That means everybody sees the picture and the location. But when you click on that, you have three choices. You have the open, everybody sees the coordinates. Obscured means the coordinates are shown in a random 22 by 22 kilometer box. So you'll see this square with a random dot within that 22 kilometer area. If you really want to make it private, why wouldn't you just pick private, right? I don't get the box. Now, the only people that can see it, let's say you put it out there and you join the Herps of Texas project and you found a horned lizard and you want to share it to the project curator, the person that looks through all the observations, can actually see the actual location. But by essentially, even if you block it, you're giving them permission when you say, I'm joining this. One of the things is I'm joining this project and I'm giving them permission to look at that. But that's a trusted person. That's not just random Joe out there.
That happens to the previously colored dots.
Yeah.
That is known to the program.
Yes. Correct. Yes.
Well,
there's no way to default it. We've tried figuring out if you could set a default to private, but you have to choose it every time. That's one of the drawbacks. And so keep in mind, this app doesn't do everything for everybody. They're trying to get the biggest, widest audience. So, ideally you could just do private everything. But you can't, you have to make that choice. Private means that there's nothing on the map that's public can see. Okay. So it's completely, it could have been taken in South America for all that anybody knows. So that way, again, if you're a property owner and you want to share information, but you don't want to share location, you can do that. So here's the other thing. Our projects, you have to join our project. You have to physically go in there, click on the project and say, I want to join it. Read through the description, say what it's doing. And once you say, I'm okay, and you can get out of it anytime too. You can go ahead and say, I want to join. Then those curators of those projects that are looking for those conservation species can see that location data. But there's a big debate going on with TPWD is, can it become a public record? And that's the tricky part we're dealing with attorneys right now, because it's not our app. We're using the data, but there's a trust issue there. So we're trying to figure out how that works, especially if the Texas Natural Diversity Database is going to get that specimen. Do they keep it blocked, or how do they do that? Because here's the dilemma. Let's say we're trying to figure out where all the horned lizards are in the state of Texas. If we can't see where they're located, the data points the pictures don't matter, right? Ultimately. So that's where the dilemma is. How do you bridge that knowledge gap with the protection of privacy? But they do have this set up so you can privatize all your observations while still sharing the image. Then the last one, or second to last one, is captive or cultivated. So if you've got native plants that you planted in your garden, is that a captive or a wild plant? It's captive. Why? It's native, but it's captive, right? So you need to, and so especially for endangered species, so there's a plant called Big red sage, only found in very few locations in Texas, but it's in the market. I mean, you can find the plant everywhere. Well, if you put it in your garden and somebody's looking for the rare locations, if it's in somebody's garden in Dallas, well, that's not really where it grows. So that's why it's our obligation to say, yeah, I need to say that I planted this. Okay. So that's an example. The standard is that it's wild. Yes. Sure. Sure.
Wild and not your property, or have you now connected up?
No, I would say I would still call that wild. If you brought it into a garden in your front yard, or went to your kid's yard in town or something like that and put it there, then it becomes more of a cultivated thing. But if you're just moving it, I think you're okay to call that wild. Yeah, absolutely. Well, captive would be like when it comes to animals. So let's say you're raising a pet raccoon, which actually you shouldn't be, but let's say you are. There's probably people in this room that did that as a kid. I'm guessing maybe, or a possum or somebody. That would be captive. So cultivated would be things that you planted. You physically took from somewhere else and planted. But in that setting where you're just moving, I would call that wild. Yeah, I would leave that as wild plant.
You
Don't check the box. And the default is you don't have to check the box.
What if you don't know?
Good question.
Because we got
I know.
2 years ago, and I have no idea.
No, we don't. And so you have to make your best guess. That's really what it comes down to. If you take a place like a nature center, you go out to a nature center, you see something around the parking lot, there's obviously trees that have been planted. But let's say some of those seeds wandered off into a field. Well, okay, is that now planted or is that wild? Wild. Good question. When does, so redbud seed gets knocked off and stuck in somebody's shoes and you go across the prairie and here it is growing where it wasn't. But there's a redbud tree back in the yard. How do you judge that? So some of that is judgment. It's your best judgment. It really is.
Take in mind that if you judge wrong, it wouldn't matter.
Somebody will let you know.
I can't go, oh, wait a minute.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes, they actually are. I've never seen anybody get mad at somebody on iNaturalist. Now, Facebook or anything else, yeah. But here they seem to be a pretty good community. So the next thing you're ready to do is share your observation. And then you go on to the next one. But just to show you that iNaturalist is not 100% perfect, what are these? These are vultures. So I do not know, this is from my colleague's husband, I do not know if the first choice was vulture, but the alternate choices was that list right there. Okay. Again, the first choice might have been black vulture, but the bear disagrees. But I love the fact that somebody thought that iNaturalist thought that might be buffalo or bison. I love that. Same color. It's not really the same shape though. But I did have a lady take a picture of a fungus on a rotting log, and it came back as first choice river otter. I wish I'd have taken a picture of that because that was pretty amazing. So again, it's not 100%, but it does a really good job. It really does, I think. So I'm going to talk briefly about photography tips. If you're using a camera, well, if you're using your iPhone, a thing to use for close-ups of flowers and stuff for detail is this little thing called a Zenvo. And I actually have one with me. It's a close-up lens. They cost about $40. You can get them online. Comes in a nice little case. And it has a little lanyard. Nothing broke. And it comes with two lenses. It comes with this really big wide angle lens, which I don't understand. So I take it off. And then here's your magnifier, which is 15 power macro. So you attach it to your phone, to your camera. And of course, all our phones now have 2 or 3 lenses. You got to figure out which lens to put it over. And you can take these kind of spectacular close-up pictures. So you can do that through the iNaturalist app if you can, and it really works great with small things. Okay. And I'll put it over here if you want to try it after the presentation, because I use it all the time. Yes.
Video, you have this constant trying to focus, so make it a lot better resolution with the video than the photo.
Yeah.
So, the reading plan, big video.
I think they are working on that, where there's some experimenting going on about short video clips, and it might be able to already do that on the web page, not the app, but the web page with a camera, maybe. But I think they're trying to move in that direction. Biggest problem iNaturalist is having right now is their success. Their servers are bulging with information. So that's why they've started voluntarily asking folks, hey, could you give us $5 a month to help us out? And I contribute $10 a month out of my own pocket. It's not that big a deal, but it helps them. So if you're a big iNaturalist user, consider that, because this is such a powerful tool. But if it breaks down, they don't have the money to operate, it goes away. But this thing, it's called a Zenbo, that's how I pronounce it, is spectacular for taking close-up things, plants, small insects, things like that. Again, test it out. And then the camera that I've been using is P900. You don't have to have a super expensive camera that's got a big zoom on it. The nice thing about this camera, which of course they don't make anymore, is it has GPS coordinates built in. Okay, because when you take a picture with your camera and you go and upload it to iNaturalist, unless your phone has GPS coordinates built in, it's not going to record that. So you have to go find it on the global map. But the nice thing is you can go in and say, I took this picture at Fredericksburg Nature Center, type that in, and it'll take you right to that location, and you can move it around and pinpoint. Right? Okay. So that's just one example. So let's talk about birds. You take a picture of the bird. This was taken with a macro lens from about 100 yards away. Okay, if I put this on iNaturalist like this, what would you think it would try to identify? The trees, right? So that's why having it on there, I can take it, put it on my computer. I can edit it down, zoom it up. I'm not going to hang that picture on the wall, but it identified it as a safe feed. Okay, since I kind of focused it. I also put it in the middle. Some pictures I like the birds over here, and there's a beautiful scene over here. No, put it right in dead center. Okay, don't make it work any harder than it has to. Let's say sometimes you get a picture of a silhouette of a bird. Once in a while, that can be identified by an naturalist. It's an upland sandpiper. Then sometimes you take a picture of a group of birds and you realize there's more than one species in the photograph. Put it on your phone, crop them, and give them one choice, because it may choose snow goose or it may choose Ross's goose. But both of them are there. So again, it's more work, but if you're serious about wanting this is what you do. You can take pictures of nests, bird nests. That's to have the eggs, not the nestlings. If you ever looked at a bird nest, they all pretty much look alike, right? Bald, eyes closed, mouths open, right? So take a picture of the eggs. The eggs are usually pretty unique. And that will help you with identifications. Then when it comes to flowers, you can take the picture. I took this picture with my camera, and then I went back to my computer and I zoomed in on it so that I got just the flower. Then I also took a picture of the stem, and I used my hand in here. I didn't have a ruler, but I used my hand because this gives me a size reference. Because for this native wildflower, does anybody know what this is? What? Agellinas. There's multiple species. And the way you identify most Agellinas in a taxonomic book is the length of the tips of the calyx. Okay, so now I've got a reference that I can use my finger, figure out how long it is, and measure it. And I was able to do that with this actually. Then I take a picture of the leaves, and then I take a picture of the whole plant. Okay, so I try to get as many. The more pictures, the merrier. Because let's face it, if we didn't have iNaturalist, and you had the flora of Texas, you'd be thumbing through a whole lot of pages with nothing but words on it. So having the more pictures you have, because who can remember every detail of every plant they ever took a picture of?
I'm glad you said that about putting your hand in, because I was concerned about impeding my hand.
No, put it in there. It's a good reference. And then for other people looking at it, that can also be a reference. Now, they don't know how big your hand is, but at least you have some reference. That's the problem with a lot of our field guides of flowers. They have a picture, a nice, beautiful picture of the flower, with a black background, like the Hill Country Guide, which is spectacular. I use it all the time. But there's no idea. There's no way of knowing how big that flower is. Is it this big or is it this big? We literally don't know from the photograph. So again, the more photographs and having your hand or a little ruler in there or something to mark it, it's good. When you take pictures of trees or woody plants, take a picture of the leaves on the stem so you know the leaf arrangement. When you're identifying trees, many of you know one of the first things you're looking at are the leaves alternate, opposite, or horrible. So that's the first thing that helps you eliminate a lot of other things. Make sure if it's a compound leaf, you get the whole compound leaf. Thank you. The backs of the leaves of woody plants can be real beneficial, even better than the fronts of the leaves, because they may have hair. They may have some kind of pubescence. They may have some kind of that grayish filmy stuff that comes off when you wipe your hand on it. If you find fruit or different other parts, take pictures of that. Here's a case of the prickle here and the tendril here. So the more information. Bark on trees. I took these two pictures, put it on iNaturalist with nothing else, and by golly, it identified both those correctly just by that picture, those two pictures. So it's amazing. Again, it's pretty amazing what it can do. By the way, just for interest point, can you see those rows of dots? Anybody know what that's caused by? Sapsucker. Now, you don't know what species, but I can put this up there and go, I think this was from an oak tree. And then go, okay, here's an oak tree, and I'm going to put it on there again, and it's going to go, this is an oak tree, and they're going to go, I'm going to type in, nope, sapsucker holds. So I get two observations off one photo. Again, I can't put yellow-bellied or, red-naped or anything, because who knows? When you're doing pictures of invertebrates, which are always a challenge, with dragonflies and damselflies, they're territorial a lot of the time. So you can get close to them to get a decent photograph by figuring out where they keep coming back and landing. And you get closer, and they fly away. And if you're lucky, they fly right back to the perch. And with patience, you can get some pretty nice pictures. These were taken, by the way, with a camera, so don't think that I took these with my cell phone. Because I would have had to be like 3 inches away, and that probably is not going to work that well. But it's worth trying. Just knowing something about the behavior of the bird. What I really like is this picture. One day I was taking a picture of this, presumably this damselfly landing on that stump in the middle of the Guadalupe River. Came back the next morning, I was taking pictures. I got back and I realized, oh my God, he's standing on the skin of a dragonfly that had come out overnight and shed its skin. You're not going to see that picture very often, I don't think. With butterflies, if you can get the top of the wings or the underside, that's great. If you can get both. You don't get very many pictures where you get both on the same photograph of two of the same species. But the more information, the better. And then when you take a picture of spiders, take a picture of the top side, the dorsal surface of the spider, not the underside, because this is where you're going to identify it from. And then things like bees or other insects, if you get a side picture and a top picture, that's good. Just gives you more detail. By the way, has anybody ever petted a bumblebee when it was foraging? When they're really foraging, you can go up and pet them, and they won't bother you. At least that one time I did it. And I'm not saying run right out there and do it. I'm just saying. Also, remember sounds count. We already talked about that. So keep that in mind. And then also roadkill and animal tracks count. Okay. There are actually projects on iNaturalist that are called roadkill projects. And there's actually projects by some state agencies out west where they hire bicyclists or train up bicyclists to drive certain routes on highways, take pictures of roadkill so they can figure out where to put land bridges or things like that for animals to pass under to reduce roadkill. Yeah.
Posted quite a few animal tracks, and a bunch of them came from 2021 now snow on the ground.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, they love them. The latest one was that I had dusted vitaminous dirt on my front porch, and overnight retail walked through it, and then walked across the porch and out someday, and
That's awesome. That's good. Very clever. Very clever.
Do that on purpose.
So one of the goals we have, we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to have to skip a few slides just because that's the nature of the beast. These trainings oftentimes are 3-hour training. So you're lucky you're only subjected to an hour tonight. But research grade. So on your observations, a lot of times you'll see a little green bar flag that says research grade. What that means is that 2/3 of the people that have looked at it, you plus another person, have looked at it and said, yep, that's what it is. When something becomes research grade on iNaturalist, organizations like mine trust that identification enough to potentially use it for the conservation purposes. So it comes up, has to be 2/3 of the people looking at it. So the web page, very quickly, and then we're going to stop here tonight. The web page is the place to go if you really want to dig into iNaturalist. Okay. As Tanya likes to say, this is where the party is. Okay. So you have a bar across the top with all kinds of things, and we're going to look at those very quickly. First of all, when you click on community, you can go and search for other iNaturalist users. You can look for projects there. That's one way to use that. If you click on more, that's where tax info is. So let's say you're going to do a presentation and you need a picture of something you don't have a picture of. You can go on here and through the Creative Commons search, you can find images that people share, and you can take and borrow their image to put into your presentation as long as you give them the photo credit. Okay, pretty neat. You don't have to pay anything for it. And then you can go down and notice it says help. Right, one of the best help things on a computer I've ever seen on a web page. Lots and lots of suggestions. And you have that there. You can go find whatever the answers to your questions here. Okay, it's really, really good. But they hide it, so I just want to let you know that. Then there's also the upload button. So if the people are using cameras and uploading pictures, you either click on add observations or upload. And the way you do that is you open up your camera pictures, you snag a picture, you drag and drop it in there, and then you process it just like you would on your phone. It's actually quite easy. And then in terms of your web page, when you create an account, you get your own iNaturalist Facebook page. Or no, iNaturalist page. Good Lord. And there's lots of choices. You have a profile. That's where you can add a description of yourself, a photo of yourself. If you want to edit it, you can go to edit, click on edit. And then there, you can go to your account. That's where you can check and make sure that your time is where it's supposed to be. And then there's observations, IDs, and projects. So these are your observations. You can edit your observations if you click on that button up there. Make sure you save or it doesn't save your changes. Not an automatic save. This is where you can ID other things for other people, which is kind of fun. If you're really good at some identifying things, you can go here, search by location, and tax a group and help other people identify what they have. You can go and start your own projects, or you can find projects that you want to submit data to by clicking on that, all projects, you get to this. Yes.
Your own project. Your own property.
You can do a project for your own property. And the way you limit who can come into it is people have to join the project. So there's a thing on the sign up when you create the project and say who are the users. If you leave it empty, everybody that comes on your property can do it. But if you put your username, or maybe the username of your husband or friend or whatever, then those are the only people that are going, if they join it, they have to join it. You're automatic, but the other person will have to join it. Those are the only people that are going to upload observations there.
Then would everybody be able to see the project or just the people?
They'd be able to see the project. You just, yeah. I mean, you can't hide the project from the public, but you can protect, you can do some things so that people can't just randomly throw stuff up there if you don't want to. Okay. So there are all kinds of projects. There are bio-blitzes, site-based. Okay. So that could be like a state park. It could be Fredericksburg Nature Center. Taxes specific. You could just do one kind of group of species. You can do your own home-based project. So you can set up a lot of different options. So just to close out, I'm going to stop with the slides. We use iNaturalist in a lot of different ways to collect data that we otherwise just would not be able to get to. You all can use it to learn more about the natural world around you. And if you're a landowner, I don't care if it's a 0.22 acre yard like mine, or it's a 1,500 acre ranch, why wouldn't you want to know what the heck's growing in your yard? I mean, I have 3 brothers that are clueless, and I just never understand it. So it's a great way to educate yourself. Okay. And then again, you can choose whether you want to share that information with other groups of people that could use that information for conservation. So really, really valuable. I noticed I was looking for projects in Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg Nature Center doesn't have a project. Someone should set that up. It's a neat little nature center over there. I assume it still exists, right? Yeah. Set up a project over there. There's all kinds of, there's a real interesting milkweed vine over there too. It's pretty rare. So anyway, lots of different reasons for using iNaturalist, even if it's just your own personal benefit. So I know I talk a lot, so I'm going to stop now. Yes. He's done. He's done.
So I only used it once.
Okay.
I took a picture of everything. I didn't know what it was. Thought I was doing the right thing. Uploaded it.